Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of our Philosophy in Motion interview series. I am thrilled to have Kolby Granville of After Dinner Conversations joining us today. Thank you, Kolby.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this and for hosting me.
Yeah. Tell the fine folks at home a little bit about yourself, maybe After Dinner Conversations. Who are you?
Yeah, so I'm the editor of After Dinner Conversation, a short story literary magazine that has a very specific niche that we deal in, and that is short stories that deal with philosophical and ethical questions. So when we score stories, we really look at two things. Number one, is it a well-written story? And number two, does it offer some sort of question or some problem that a group of friends could get together and argue over as reasonable minds? And so we're probably one of the only literary magazines that turns away perfectly good, great work because it doesn't fit our niche. So yeah, so we that's what we do. So, but as far as the genres, we publish everything: westerns, romance, sci-fi, fantasy, whatever. As long as there's some, modern, feminist writing, whatever. As long as there's some sort of specific ethical question that sort of reasonable minds could differ on.
All right. I love that.
Thanks.
And you make a perfect candidate for this interview, so that's fantastic.
Indeed, indeed.
Speaking of the interview, let's go to our first question.
Okay.
So how would you go about describing your highest advantage?
So I heard this question in other interviews, and I have a first question to ask you, and maybe the answer is I'm supposed to have my own answer. What do you mean by highest advantage?
Well, you're supposed to have your own answer. Now,
Okay, then
I'm
I can define what highest advantage means to me if you would like, but there are obviously
exactly.
many ways it can be defined.
Yeah, so I'm playing off of very classically defined notions of highest advantage to
Sure.
highest good, but I like that phrasing because it could be taken in all sorts of directions. So, what's
It
your
it
take?
can be sort of highest and best use if you're looking at it from like a city planning standpoint, or it can be from a philosophy standpoint, or it can be from a selfish standpoint. What is your highest advantage? Which I guess the answer would just be make money. But that's not how I would define it. To me, highest advantage means something like how are you most useful? Um, and that probably shows my own bias on the topic. And so I would say for me, the highest advantage is doing something that you feel like is your version of curing cancer. And I've mentioned this to other people in the past. Like I'm very fortunate in that most of my life, I have felt like I am in the curing cancer business. Now, obviously, I don't cure cancer, but this idea of like when you wake up in the morning, you're like, I am doing something that matters, right? It either matters to my family or to my community or to my country or to my faith or to whatever the case may be. I am curing cancer, whatever my version of cancer is that I'm trying to cure. Um, and I've been very lucky in that I've been able to do that basically my whole life.
Okay. Would you qualify that as a utilitarian standpoint, or maybe?
It might be a utilitarian standpoint, but here's why I'm not a pure utilitarian in that, I don't necessarily think that if you go to the dentist office and they're like, if we harvested your organs, like I know you're in here for a root canal, but if we harvested your organs, we could save 5 people. Uh, that's probably a pure utilitarian would be like 5 for 1, 1 for 5. That's a pretty good deal. But if that were the case, no one would ever go to the dentist, or they certainly never want to be sedated. So I'm probably not in the way of a pure utilitarian in that. Um, but I do think that you need to feel that what you do matters. And I think for most people, that would be defined as matters to humanity. Now, one of the things that maybe makes this a more complicated, less clear answer is our own values and our own culture and our own background is going to dictate what curing cancer is, right, for us. And that might be being a good parent. It might be being a good sports coach. It might be being a good teacher or a firefighter, or it might be being a good business person, which is not really my thing. But here's the part that I struggle with is I'm not sure I'm right about anything I do. And that's good, I think, because that means I'm always willing to hear input on how I could do it better. And as soon as I tell someone else, like, your highest and best use, you're curing cancer, you're an idiot. Like, that's a stupid, you're wrong. That's not the thing you should be doing. That presumes that I'm sure that what I am doing is correct. And I don't know if I can make that presumption. The best I think I can ever say is it seems to be the best for me. But I wouldn't presume to tell somebody else that that what they're doing isn't, at least as they see it, the best for them, even though I might personally just think like, no, you're wrong.
I'm seeing some shades of existentialism in there, and maybe a little pragmatism sprinkled in.
A little bit, yeah. It's one of the nice things about doing after dinner conversation is a lot of philosophy that you read and a lot of classes deal with the abstract, and a lot of those things. I had a student once who said, and this, I'll have to explain what she said because it's a little bit of a weird phrase. She says, I asked her, what would you do in that situation? This was over some book we were reading. And she said, I don't know, Mr. Granville, that's like an abortion question. And I was like, you're going to have to explain that. What does that mean, an abortion question? She's like, well, every woman says that she knows what she would do if she had an unwanted pregnancy. And until you have an unwanted pregnancy, that really is the first time you find out what you would actually do. Because it's very simple to sort of sit back and contemplate it. It's a very different thing to experience it. And I think that is often true. And one of the failings of philosophy is that, and one of the advantages of after dinner conversation in some degree, right? It's very easy to say, I want to do the most good for the most people, until you're asked to sacrifice a family member for 5 strangers. And then you're forced to make this very uncomfortable practical application of your theory and modify it and say, you know what? The people I know are worth more than the people I don't know. And that's something that we don't like to say out loud. And it's not something that we want to say in a sort of purely philosophical discussion sometimes. And that's why the ability to take these ideas and apply them to situations cause, I think, this refinement.
Yeah, nice. So is it safe to say that you have had experience being faced with the question, what is good for me? What makes me most useful? What matters to me?
Yeah, I think everyone is faced with it, but only some people think about it. Because I think we've all come across people who are sort of the quintessential version of the spotless mind, right? Like they go through life and they live their whole life. And if you were to ask them, like, why did you make that decision? They go, I don't know. You go, well, why? Like, what did you get out of that you didn't get out of this other decision? I don't know, it seemed like the right idea. Okay, let's break that down. Define right idea. It's just like the thing you do. Okay, like how do you define the thing you do? And they are the spotless mind, right? They are actions without contemplation in a sort of active way. They are habit incarnate. I would say for the people who are either deeper readers or people who deal in philosophy or ethics, or people who just like TVs and shows and movies that deal with that sort of thing, it makes you sort of very meta about your choices, right? It's I heard someone say once, I'm not the voice in my head doubting myself. I'm the voice in my head asking myself why the voice in my head is doubting myself, right?
Okay.
And so because and this is just my simple example, but everyone's like, you're so stupid. And it's like, that's not you. You is the one who can look at that and be like, why am I saying I am so stupid? And I think for people who think more about these things in an active way, that's what we do, right? Is you ask yourself, and a great example of this is from The Good Place, which is a great show. The main character, the ethics professor, he always throughout the whole show, he's like, I knew almond milk created environmental hazards, but I kept drinking it. And it's like, it's like, yeah, like no one ever is the version of themselves that they wish they were all of the time, unless they are the spotless mind, right? But what we are, and this is what I think philosophy and ethics and these discussions and programs like yours do, is it allows us to imagine an infinite point of what the perfect version of a human would be. And then it allows us to then weigh ourselves against that infinite point and hopefully try and move towards it, even though we will never get to it.
You don't mind me asking, who is that voice of doubt, or where's the source of that voice? If it's not me, where'd it come from? How to get in there?
Yeah. So I think that voice of doubt, it is you, but it's a version of you, right? It's like when you're dreaming and you have someone in your dream who tells you you're stupid. That is you, but also the version of you that is afraid of that is also the version of you. And so one of the things that I don't know is unique to humanity, but is certainly a prominent feature of humanity, is to self-analyze our self-analysis, right? And I think that's a rare thing that allows us to do what other animals do in lesser degrees, and that is project future versions of ourselves, future outcomes, and then try and think, five moves ahead on the chessboard.
Well, speaking of humanity, would you say that your personal highest advantage connects to a potential universal or common notion of humanity's highest advantage?
So that's working on an assumption that that I only half agree with, and that assumption being is that there is some standard truth that is universal. And the way that I think about this is, so let's say that we went back to caveman times or pre-caveman times, or 100,000 years ago. We would look at those people and be like, wow, you are making some hard decisions, right? You're not being what I would hope we would be. And one of the things that frustrates me about humanity is we always think now we've got it right, even though we acknowledge that in the past we didn't have it right, and that a future will exist that will look at us. And if you acknowledge that people in the past thought they were getting it right and were wrong, you must acknowledge that we think we are getting it right and we are wrong. And so do I think that I am doing my highest and best use? Do I think I'm working to my best advantage as I understand it? Yes. Do I think I'm doing it exactly? And I would hope everyone would. I don't think everyone does, but that's kind of what we would define as a conscience, right? Is you're like, yeah, today I watched TV for 6 hours. Even though someone else might say that is to life's greatest advantage. My dad was that way, right? He did nothing useful with his life, and he died a happy man. And while I would criticize that for me, I don't know how I criticize that for him, right? Except to say, like, yeah, you're a product of your time, I guess. And so I would say, I would hope that every day I am working towards my imagined version of what humanity wants me to be, knowing that the next group of people will look at me and be like, that dude was an idiot. And that's fine. That's fine, right? Because that's the way it should be. If you assume, unless you assume that there is some, sort of universal version of truth, and that I somehow can intuit it from whatever meditation or, mushrooms or something. And maybe that's true, but that seems hard to believe. I'll give you one thing and then I'll shut up and let you ask the next question. Is so Neil deGrasse Tyson, I saw an interview with him once, and he said that we are, I forget what the number was, but we're like 99.8% the equivalent of like a baboon or, another higher form of monkey. And that 0.2 tenths of a percent is what gives us space travel, calculus, knowledge of self, philosophy, writing, all of it. If you assume that there must be something that is also 0.2%, 2 tenths of a percent better than we are, or maybe we will someday be 2 tenths of a percent better than we are, then our most advanced mathematics will seem to them like a monkey with a stick seems to us, right? And so it is the height of arrogance to think we could even comprehend some version of sort of big T truth. This is also my trouble with religion.
Okay. Oh, I wonder about scientism on that same vein. What sorts of arrogance we might find in
right
in motivating us to think of ourselves as 2% better than a monkey to begin with.
Right, exactly. That's very true, right? Yeah, that's very true.
Okay, yeah, I love just how much conversation you're in, how many domains of conversation you're in answering these questions. Oh, now I'm seeing a little bit of pessimism sprinkled in there, a little bit of reference to science. So we've gotten a little bit of everything.
I see you jotting notes, which tells me I'm giving you ideas.
Oh, yes.
Good.
Speaking of something you said before, in terms of these moral questions or situations or confrontations that happen in everyday life and allow us opportunities to reflect on these abstract notions and how we might refine them, how they might refine our understanding of those everyday situations. How do your everyday practical endeavors serve the achievement of your personal highest advantage?
I'm gonna repeat this back to make sure I understand. So you're saying, how do my everyday choices further my achievement of my best use in my mind?
Sure.
Yeah.
Or your behavior.
Highest advantage. Yeah. So I think the thing that for me, and this is very practical, this is a very practical answer. So I think once you ask yourself, what is the best use of myself, right? And to me, my answer would be the improvement of the quality of humanity. Okay, the betterment of humanity. Then everything that you do that isn't that is you wasting your time. And that's tough, because that means when you're eating, you're wasting your time. When you're doing dishes, you're wasting your time. When you're doing anything but the thing you should be doing, you are not doing the right thing. And that's a tough thing to come to terms with sometimes, right? Because sometimes you have to figure out how these day-to-day things might be okay. So let's say that your mom or your dad or your brother or your sister call, and you have to figure out, how does the 45 minutes that I take helping them work on their computer, turns out it's just the on switch. How is that doing anything to further my best use, my highest advantage? And the thing you have to figure out is how, like, does it? Uh, and you have to be like, okay, part of my highest use is demonstrating empathy and love for others. Um, and sometimes doing really mundane, stupid things that a Google search would have solved for them might be the thing I'm doing is not solving your computer problem. The thing I'm doing is showing you that you matter. And in the larger sense, the thing I'm really doing is showing myself that humans matter. And I just happen to be doing it by troubleshooting your computer, right? As opposed to dismissing you. But there's a lot of stuff that I really struggle with why people do it. Like sports events are a great example. I'm the worst sports fan ever. You're asking me to watch other people live their lives and care. I can't fathom why that exists, right? And you're somehow differentiating it between that and professional wrestling, which in both cases, it's the story people care about, right? Who are the good guys and the bad guys? So if you know it's the story, then why don't you just watch a story? If it's an athletic story, why don't you watch an athletic story? Like, why don't you focus on the story instead of the athleticism? And there's a million reality shows where I'm just like, I don't get how you think that this is doing anything to help humanity. How it can be anything but just the most base opiate for you to like not think about real things. Like if you want opium, do opium. It's going to be faster, it's going to be better, you're going to like it more. So why watch Survivor? And I will tell you, this makes me a horrible human being in conversations because I don't understand when somebody wants to talk to me about a show, any reality shows or like Friends or Seinfeld or fill in the blank of anything like that. And of course, the next thing they'll say is, well, you watch movies. And I'm like, yeah, but I watch movies or even TV shows because I feel very self-aggrandizing in saying this, and I apologize. But I watch them because I want to understand more of what it means to be human. And so what you're doing is you're constructing fiction to help me understand fact, as opposed to so many things which aren't doing that. They're just opium.
I will say though, watch a few episodes of Survivor, and you get a very
you get sucked in. I've no doubt. Like I said, I'm the worst person to have these conversations with, which is why I make it a point never to have these conversations with the people I care about, because it always comes across as me judging them, and then the other side of me is always like, who am I to say? Like I only know what I believe. I can't. For all I know, every day you're crushing it according to you.
The human ego and the psyche and our wild motivations are on display in those shows.
I'm sure. I'm
um,
sure.
have you ever seen Naked and Afraid?
I'm aware of it, but I've not seen it.
Oh my gosh, they take typically a man and a woman, although they've switched things up a couple times.
Yeah.
They send them off into some remote, uninhabitable place, and they're naked, and they have to survive for 29 days.
Yeah.
I sit there and wonder every time, what motivates you to want to be on this show to begin with?
Right.
So
I have a better understanding of why you'd want to be on the show than why you would want to watch the show. I have the same thing with sports, right? So if somebody said, I want to do a sport or I want to do a reality show, I'm like, yeah, it's a way to test yourself. It's a way to test your, whatever. It's a way to understand yourself better. What I don't understand is watching other people do that. But again, I don't judge. I try not to judge other people for watching it. I just don't understand it myself. That's all.
fair, 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 fair. So I think we've answered this question, but I do want to just cover everything.
Sure.
So, does that notion of a common human advantage come into play in your everyday endeavors? Now, you'd mentioned, does this highest advantage for humanity exist? We might not be so sure on that, but does that come into play
A
in
common
your?
human advantage. Yeah. So there's a story, a short story, I believe it is, or a subsection of a short story by Kurt Vonnegut. I think it's Kurt Vonnegut. I could be getting it wrong. Where these birds fly into a valley, and in this, it's a fictional story, I believe. Uh, and they realize that instead of trying to catch insects, if they sit on the backs of these buffalo, water buffalo, or whatever, they can eat the insects off the backs of the water buffalo. And they don't have to fly, they don't have to do anything. They can basically eat as much as they want. And it's generally considered to be an advantage. Like, look, you don't have to work so hard and you get to eat unlimited amount of food forever until a migratory group of birds come through that live and feed on these other birds. And of course, because these other birds are now fat and lazy, they get completely decimated and wiped out. And the thing that I've always that's always stuck with me is everything I think I know, I'm also willing to believe that I could be the fat bird on the back of the tree, on the back of the animal, right? Um, and so like we believe like we should have, like, I'm pretty socialist in my beliefs, that we should have health care for everyone, that we should have some sort of quality of life, that we should have access to outdoor spaces, access to community and friends, access to the ability to share experiences with other people. And I think I'm right, but I could just be the fat bird on the back of the thing, right? On the back of the animal. And one of the areas is where I think about this is you hear sometimes, there's a little bit of a tangent, but not too much, is you hear about people that either have learning disabilities or ADHD or all the different variations, what we now call sort of neurodivergent, in a million different ways, right? And we think, and the first thing we want to do as a society is medicate them or fix them or make it so that they don't obsess over stuff or whatever, make it so that they don't have violent tendencies or whatever. But here's the thing, like, nature didn't make those people on accident. Like, all of the versions of humanity that exists is nature hedging its bets. Because at some point, all of those aspects of humanity, given the right situation, are probably needed. And so while I believe I'm moving us towards the collective good, and I think we all should move ourselves, do the things that do the best for a collective good, you also have to understand that you don't become Napoleon because you're a well-balanced person, right? You don't become Mozart because you're a well-adjusted human being. You don't become Michelangelo or Newton or Einstein because you're fine. And so I do the best I can. I hope we all do, but I also very much believe I could be wrong. Like but how can but you can't do anything but what you think is right, knowing that you could be wrong.
Yeah. I like this notion because it calls for diversification. We want
Right.
it's a broad portfolio.
Right. Nature knows what it needs. It's not creating stuff. It's not creating stuff that might not come in handy later.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
as a drummer, I've been so stupid in so many other domains, but that drummer brain, it
Right.
serves a purpose.
Exactly. That's exactly it, right? It's all like you have to measure yourself against what you seem to have been made for, as opposed to measure yourself against what other people seem to have been made for.
And this could also go to a defense of philosophers, and we are an
Mhm.
odd bunch. And I had a friend
You're
who
the end of the bell curve. Yeah, for sure.
he always said, "There's something wrong with you if
Right.
you are into this field." My goodness, so we're necessary, world. I hope
Right.
you do this.
Right. In some small way. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get a little more metaphysical.
Okay.
Let's push this bell curve as far as it can go.
Let's go.
Or so how do you come to know the basic patterns of the mind or the human experience? What's your point of access to those patterns?
Um, that's a good question. So I think one of the key points of access, and one of our earliest points of access, is empathy. Um, as soon as you pull a 6-year-old aside at the playground and ask them, how would you feel if you were getting hit? That's the very start of understanding, right? And maybe this is why this is a basic tenet of every religion, this sort of, do unto others thing. And I think so that's where you start off. And I think for a good portion of the population, they never get there, right? Um, I mean, and I'll give you a more advanced version of this. Is I had somebody yesterday in a meeting just yell out in the meeting, and they just kept repeating it. Do you think you're God? Like, why do you keep doing this? Do you think you're God? And I wanted to be like, no, I think I'm running the meeting. Like, I think I'm the one with the gavel. Um, and the thing I had to remind myself in that moment is that um, I have to judge them from where they are. And from where they are, they don't know that what they're saying is just stupid. Um, and so, it's this idea of, which is more impressive if a superhero lifts a bus or if a mother does, right? The heroism is doing 5% more than you were capable of yesterday. It's not an absolute sense of what you did. And so heroism for that person might be them having a moment of reflection and saying, God, what I just said, I wouldn't like if someone said to me. But that person hasn't even gotten to that point yet, right? And so I think that's where you start off is with just empathy and trying to get yourself 5% more, 5% more until you um, man, I got in a huge argument with a friend of mine about this yesterday, about a month ago, actually. He is an idiot, and he's like, I don't care if gay people get married as long as it's not called marriage. And I'm like, so you don't care if gay people be married, you just don't want to be called marriage. He's like, because marriage means a man and a woman. I'm like, cool. Then let's get rid of the word marriage. We'll invent a new word, smarriage, and then everyone can get smarriaged, including you and gay people. He was like, no, I don't want to be smarriaged. I want to be married. And I'm like, because it means something different to you. And it means something special to you. And you think it belongs to you. And that definitionally means that you think it's okay to deny it to someone else. To me, that was 5% more than he currently understood, and I couldn't get him there. And I was just like, all right, man, like I tried, right? And so I couldn't get him yet to have empathy that maybe the thing that you want other people and deserve, other people want and deserve. And so he's 50 years old and he hasn't really developed um, what a 6-year-old would have developed, right? Because the beginnings of empathy are fear and repetition. I'll get grounded if I don't do this. And so maybe you don't hit the kid on the playground because you know you'll get in trouble for hitting the kid on the playground. That's not empathy. That's a rule. But you hope that that rule eventually becomes universalized into empathy. And my friend is 50 years old and he hasn't done that yet. And that's tough. that's really tough to have that person as a friend sometimes.
I think this speaks to what you were speaking about before with that student in the abortion example. Maybe he just hasn't been faced with
Right.
the harsh reality of having a right taken away or a tax
That's
advantage taken away from you.
yeah.
For so the
Right.
reason.
It's not a coincidence that he is a white suburban male who grew up with two parents. Right. Yeah. No, he has had no reason to ever be empathetic because he has never had an instance where he was poorly treated um, in reality. I'm sure in his mind he has been, but not in the same way that other people have been.
Do you think, going back to the diversification of humanity, that such views like his are somehow necessary to keep the conversation going? As backwards as his thinking might be, as much as you want him to progress and to grow some empathy, I mean, he certainly served as a great example in this conversation.
Yeah. Do I think he serves a purpose? So I'm of two minds of this. So one, I think he is just an idiot and he is going to die an idiot. And the best chance I have is by having the conversations in a polite way in front of his children. Um, uh, as far as do I think he serves a purpose by being that way? I don't know. Like the better version of me says yes, but it's really hard for me to understand how someone cannot understand that every person is a version of themselves. And that every person deserves the same things that you would ask for yourself. Um, that's really hard for me to understand. Like, now, if I want someone to carry a gun and go kill bad people, then I'd probably hire him, right? Because he is a very good example of someone that I can show 300 images of sort of, Goebbels-esque propaganda to and convince him who the bad guy is, and he'll go kill them and sleep well at night. I will not, right? I'd be the worst soldier ever. Um, but yeah, he'd fall right to sleep. So I don't know. Maybe he does serve a purpose, but it's hard for me to feel that way sometimes.
Not to fall into some sort of patriarchy here, but
Yeah, sure.
I feel maybe a little bit of Plato might be helpful in that, you've got your warrior class, you've got your
Yeah,
merchant class, and you've got your
could
elite.
be.
I too would make an
Ironically, he would not read Plato. But yes, I think you're right. I think he is living it without knowing he is living it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And in America, that just is such a weird position to be in, and as a feminist who is all about equality, that puts me in a weird
Right.
position. Like, baby, that's not how we treat
Right.
people or think about people, and let's
Right.
progress. But at the same time, I want you to be included, and the conversation is richer because of the many voices here. Like, how do we mitigate that
Well,
diversity while protecting uh, liberty for
but
all?
but here's the thing I also have to understand is someday in some conversation I will be him, right? Everyone's parent was at one point a liberal child compared to their parents. Um, and so I have to know that like when I talk to a 20 something year old or a teenager, like their thinking has progressed and they have to help me understand things that I'm just like, what? Like, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. And so it's hard to be mad at a version of what I know I must sometimes be.
Yeah.
And I just try and remind myself, if I ever am him in another conversation, like, listen, be respectful, understand you might not have it right. And so that maybe unlike him, I can move from my outdated thinking.
Yeah. As curmudgeon-y as you paint yourself to be, I mean, I think it speaks a lot to your character that you're willing to still befriend this guy. And I think you've got a great um, plan there to just engage in polite conversation, demonstrate the
Yeah,
values that you wish to impart on this world, and be a good example for his children. Like, hey, this is your dad. I don't want to disrespect the role that he
right.
plays in rearing you, but hey, this is another way you could think about it.
But P.S. Someday he's going to die,
Yeah.
right? And all of him are going to die. Yeah, I do think that sometimes. And I don't know. We'll see. Again, we just all just do the best we can.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Um, last line of questioning here. I'll bring that existential, psychological, metaphysical back down to this practical world.
Sure.
How do you make use of those patterns of the mind, patterns of human behavior, um, in your everyday practical endeavors?
So one of the things that I try to do, and I am not as successful as I should, is to recognize data points. One of the things that I see other people not do, and that I therefore know, like, if other people don't do this, I'm not special. I must also not do this. Is they don't always see the cause and effect relationships between things that they do, right? They make a lot of impulse purchases and then they never have enough money. And they never are able to draw that, they're never able to see the trend line, to use a better term, right? And one of the things that I try to do, and I frequently fail at it, is to try and step away and see the trend line, to see, like, I'm not getting the results I want. What are the things I'm doing that are continually causing me to not get the things I want, right? And I'll use a really practical, simple example of this, just because I deal in the very practical as opposed to the sort of the ethereal. I was sitting on like an outdoor patio once on Santa Monica Boulevard, and I was watching couples go by. It was like a little boardwalk area where couples walk, and I was watching people go by, and I remember thinking, like, oh, she's cute, she's cute, she's cute, because I'm like 23 at the time. That's what you do as a 23-year-old boy. And I remember looking at the guys the girls were with, and none of them looked like me. None of them dressed like me. None of them made money like me. I wasn't making much money at the time. And I just thought, wait a minute, like, why am I getting angry at the fish when I'm making myself the wrong kind of bait? And that's what I mean by an example of a trend line, right? Where he's like, I'm not dating the people that I would like to be dating. I'm not interacting with the people that I would like to be interacting with. So let me look at the kind of people they interact with or the kind of people they date, and let me adopt those habits so that those people will find me compelling. And that might be like, get a haircut, drop 20 pounds, but it might also be read better books. It might be engage in better conversation. It might be, compliment more, help more, just be a different kind of citizen. And then you might be a better kind of bait to the kind of fish that you wish you were interacting with. And that's a really practical example of how you can look at lots of different things, right? Why don't I have the kind of job I want? Why don't I have the kind of life I want? Why don't I have the kind of happiness I want? Well, look at people that are happy and see what are the things that they're doing that I'm not doing, or who are the people there. And I think this is probably more the answer in that case. Who are the people they are being that I'm not being? right? A person who's grateful and has gratitude, a person who sees the beauty in small moments, a person who makes time for friends. Um, and so that's one of the things that I probably learn about half as fast as I should. Um, but I'm always trying.
I like how you ended with gratitude and making time for friends, that sort of practice, because I feel like sitting on the bench and, wanting to be the bait, you could so easily change who you are or hide who you are, live inauthentically,
Yeah.
change material aspects about yourself. But what you're saying is, change something, maybe not as spiritual, but what are your mental practices? I feel like those practices, the practical practices you spoke of, have their origin in a way of thinking and the beliefs that you have about yourself and the relationship to the world. It's more philosophical. That's the word, maybe
Yeah.
philosophical. Um, so I'll get into the tarot card readers on YouTube. And someone said last night,
Uh-huh.
you know, you're not getting what you want because you either think that you're unlovable or you're not receptive to receiving help. I'm
Mhm.
in therapy and I'm trying to practice gratitude. I'll do a little journaling
Mhm.
every day, like, oh, I'm so grateful, friends and family, that I have my limbs, I've got this apartment, listen to all these
Mhm.
things that I'm grateful for. But maybe there's some hidden assumption, some hidden way that I'm thinking about myself in the world that's keeping me from the abundance without,
Mhm.
falling into toxic positivity. Like,
Yeah.
let me manifest this world without doing anything, manifest this world that I want. Do you think that there could be hidden, just beliefs, not so much about, hey, you should be grateful about the world and your friends and make time for them, or hey, get a haircut, or work on ways to better yourself? Do you think that there are more deep, pernicious practices that could be useful in some circumstances, but that might be holding you back in other ways?
Yeah. So I used to be a competitive archer. Um, went to college on an archery scholarship. I have a very small build, so archery was going to be archery or nothing. Like there was no other sport I was going to be big enough. So like archery or cross country were going to be my two options. And at the time, there was a guy who was a 76 and 84 silver medalist for archery. He would have been the 80 gold or silver medalist, but we boycotted the 80 Olympics. Uh, and he was giving a lecture thing. And he said, I'm going to tell you all everything I do to win. He's like, and I'm not keeping any secrets from you. And he's like, and I'm willing to tell you all everything I do to win because I know you won't do it. Um, he's like, and that way I'm off the hook for having told you everything and I still get to win. My conscience is now clear. And I think that that is often true, that you can tell. So everyone's heard the phrase, when the student is ready, the teacher shows themselves, right? Um, so I'm a big believer that there are many teachers that walk by us every day. There are many potential people we can learn from. The problem isn't that the teachers aren't there. The problem is we're not there, right? And so we interact with a lot of people who know more than we do, but we are not in a place yet to either ask for help or to hear help when they give it to us. And so if there is a secret, the secret is like in Kung Fu Panda. The secret is there is no secret. Um, the secret is it's just work. It's work. Like that's the secret. And uh, I mean, there are certainly things that I do that help me, but everyone will have talked to someone who told them the things that worked for them, and they'd have been like, "That's stupid." Like, yeah, because you weren't ready to hear it yet, um, right? And so for me, it's really simple. I lay in bed for 10 minutes in the morning before I get out of bed when I'm not hungry, when I don't have to pee, when I'm already awake. And I just think like, what am I, what do I, when I remove my ego and I remove myself, what should today look like? And that's it. There's no secret to that. The secret is nobody wants to do it. Nobody wants to say, what should I be if I wasn't trying to be a jackass? If I wasn't, if my goal wasn't to sort of shovel stuff into the hole that I refuse to fill of my own ego, then who would I be? And people shovel stuff in there. We had a great story we published once about a guy who wakes up in the morning and he's got a small hole in his chest. And he looks at it, he's like, what is this? And he's like, and he doesn't hurt and he's not bleeding. There's just a hole. And throughout the day, the hole gets bigger and bigger. And he thinks, well, if I can fill the hole, like maybe no one will notice. So he goes to work and he's like stuffing towels in the hole and hiding stuff and putting a bird in the hole. He's putting all these things. His hole gets bigger and bigger in his stomach and his chest. And it was much more of an ethereal sort of strange story than we normally publish. And it was all about him trying to shovel stuff into himself. And it's like, yeah, like whether it's a Ferrari or a hot boyfriend or girlfriend or a medal or a compliment or whatever, like that is a hole you can never fill. And once you realize that, you can start making other decisions. And just know, like, yeah, like I'm never going to be everything. So I just need to accept me as I am.
Very
Right.
Eastern now here sprinkled in.
It is. It can be. Well, it's the archery thing. Like I've read Zen and the Art of Archery about 30 times. Yeah.
I kind of want to go back to this winner teacher that you had, the
Oh
archery
yeah.
teacher. What did he say that no one was going to
Rick
practice?
McKinney. Yeah, Rick McKinney. He's still around. He still shoots a little bit, coaches more now. He just said, look, I shoot 300 arrows a day. I weight train an hour 4 times a week. I run. I do. This is also in like 1984 when nobody was doing this, 1985 when nobody was doing this. He's like, I do mental visualization for, 45 minutes every day, twice a day, and imagine myself doing what I performing. And I both cultivate a body that is capable of doing these things, but a mind that expects these things. So that if I shoot a score that's 5 points higher than I've ever shot it before, I'm not surprised, right? I mean, and this is probably not true in every sport, but I think it's certainly true in archery. You can only be as good as you imagine you are. Because what happens is you shoot like 10, 10, 10, 10. And what's the first thing you do? You think, I've never shot 6 10s in a row before. Well, then your ego is like, yep, let's pull you back to where you think you are, right? You think you are a person who doesn't shoot 6 10s in a row. And so what you have to do is you have to have seen it so many times in your mind that that when that happens, your ego is like, I am a person who shoots 6 10s in a row because I've done it 1,000 times now, right? One of the other stories we published, which was a great story called Performance, I believe, was about 2 twins that were separated from birth. And one of the twins is a mob boss who's, rude and aggressive and a really terrible person. And so the government goes and gets the other twin and says, look, we want you to be this other, we're going to kidnap that other mob boss. We're going to put you in his place. We're going to have you be there for a couple of weeks, wear a wire, and then we're going to arrest everybody. Well, the other twin was like a very meek, low ego, low self-esteem librarian type of person, right? and a very, I don't know what the person was. I don't want to pick on librarians, accountant or something. And so the guy's like, look, I can't do it. I can't treat people that way. I don't know what he knows. I can't walk his way. I don't have my shoulders back the same way. And they said, no problem. We've invented a full body, like a VR suit, with like that pulls and stretches you. And we're going to have the suit walk and help. So it's when you don't move your legs in the right way, you're going to feel more resistance. And when you move them in the right way, you're going to feel less resistance. And when your posture is the right way, you're going to feel less resistance. And so this suit is going to craft you into the mannerisms of this person. And he's like, it'll never work. But sure enough, over a period of a few months of going through this training, and they'd also have these like video images. It was like a sort of holodeck 3D thing where they'd have actors acting out the role of other people, and he would read the dialogue of the other person. And day after day after day, he would carry himself the way his twin carried himself and say the things that the twin said. And as the model goes on, as the training goes on, he begins to anticipate what his twin would have said. And he begins to ad-lib in the mode of the twin and the body language of the twin. And eventually he realizes that even when he's not in the sort of training room, he is becoming more and more of the twin. And then of course the story goes on. But the reason we selected that story is because of this idea of to what degree does our mind dictate our actions, and what degree do our actions dictate our mind, right? And if we know that at least to some degree our actions dictate our mind, then why don't we force ourselves to take actions that create the mindset we wish we had, right? And you see this in like psychotherapy all the time. Like, don't say bad things about yourself because you're listening. And so in very simple ways, we already do this. And this is what the stories in After Dinner Conversation are so great at, is they take something that we sort of intuit to be vaguely true, and we create a scenario that amplifies it in such a way that you have to either acknowledge that it is not true, or that it must be true in this bigger than life way. And therefore it must also be true to some degree in this smaller than life way. Right. Yeah. And so, like, act the way that you would like to think is partially what he was telling us.
Yes. My goodness. That's a pretty deep word to end on. I can't
Yeah.
something, oh my gosh.
You can ask me like favorite animal or something if you want to end on something lighter or whatever. If you could be a vegetable, what vegetable would you be? Or I don't know, whatever.
I'd be a carrot. How about you?
Yeah. A mango.
Oh, okay.
I feel like they're an underappreciated food.
Oh, yes. Oh, I love some mango juice. I had some
Yes.
mango popsicles. Like, instead of there being
Mhm.
like orange cream, it was mango cream. Like, oh, blowing my mind here.
Yeah, not a bad thing at all.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, Colby, carrot to mango, thank you for stopping by. This has been an awesome conversation. Everybody else out there, check out After Dinner Conversations. Clearly, a lot of food for thought. So save room in your bellies for your after dinner dessert or digestive, whatever it is you're doing after dinner.
I thank you, and thank you for everything you do. I've watched a lot of episodes of this, and I always really enjoy them. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. All right. See you all next time.